Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the City with me, Jez Davies. And
I think you'll find it's Beyond the South Stand.
Well, yeah, I thought I'd go with it because it seems like quite a good name, and one of our memberships is called that, isn't it, Morgan? I think.
The current new membership for Norwich City fans is called Beyond the City.
Yeah. I don't know where they got the idea.
Don't know. Seems weird to me.
Word.
Seems absolutely. Must have pulled it out of the hat like a magic rabbit.
Yeah. So no, I think fair play to him for obviously acknowledging the work we've put in the last year, Morgan. So thanks Norwich City, and hope you had a lot of Beyond the Cities. So there we go. And if you need any help promoting it, let us know. Good. So I think we all know why we're here. We've got the fine gentleman that is Alex Porter. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, good to be here. How are you guys? You all right?
Yeah, not bad. Thank you very much. I mean, I think if you sort of just explain perhaps why you're on here and what team do you support and how did they do last season, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, the badge does a little bit of a job for me, which is nice. So obviously Nottingham Forest. We are one of the very fortunate teams that we did a very decent job last year under very unexpected circumstances to be qualifying for a European competition.
Yeah.
I think that it's one of those things. I mean, being a 28-year-old gentleman, never expected I would ever see in my entire life, but here we are. We're actually competing. We've had a couple of Premier League seasons where we've just been just about surviving. We've had a lot of issues with financial fair play kicking us up the arse. Same with a few clubs that have been unfortunately dealing with that. But we've dealt with a lot of stuff. And last year we brought in Nuno Espirito Santo as a head coach. And he appears to know what he's doing. So next year we will, bar a unfortunate circumstance in which we lose some kind of qualifier game, be competing in a European competition for the first time since, I think, as far as my awareness goes, the 1990s before I was born. So this is unprecedented times for me. I'm rather enjoying it. I'm enjoying it now because we're not screwing up the second season syndrome type stuff. But for now, it's a great time to be. It's a great time to be a Forest fan, I think.
No, definitely. Morgan, did you have any follow-ups?
No, that's it. That's the end of the podcast. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, everyone. Yes. Yeah.
I'm going for a drink. Come off. That's right.
No, so Alex, like before we delve into much more of a chat with you, for the Nottingham Forest fans who are checking this out, Beyond the South Stand is a vehicle in which myself and Jeremy, the other co-host, the illustrious co-host, we talk to fans of other clubs. And because it's the off season, we decided that it would be a really, really cool thing to speak to fans of clubs that have got promoted or have won cups or who have made it into the Champions League. So, or European or Europe. So the reason why Alex Porter, the fine gentleman before me, is sat here in the hot seat is primarily because of that reason. So Beyond the South Stand, off script is what we call it. Ordinarily, we ask questions. We have a bunch of prime questions that we would ordinarily ask the willing victim, but we decided we'll just see what happens if we just go off at a tangent and see where that leads us.
No, that's good. I think as well, Alex, you come up with some really good points there. So it was, I guess probably the best place to start would be to say it was your second season back in the Premier League after promotion, right?
Third season. Yeah, we had a couple of seasons. I think first season we had a bit of a go crazy on the spend, crazy on the results, but not in the right way. And we just about survived. Second season, we were a bit unlucky with the financial fair play stuff.
Yeah.
Sacked Steve Cooper halfway through the season, which, in my opinion, at the time, I was a bit against it. Brought in Nuno Espirito Santo, and I was a bit underwhelmed by it at the time, but he steadied the ship. He knew what to do with the players. We were just about okay We had to win on the penultimate day of the season against Burnley, I think it was. And then, third season, we just seemed to, the low block ball that we played, we just seemed to know how to deal with everybody suddenly out of nowhere. I mean, as a fan, it's a bit of those weird things where you just look at it and think, oh, wow, it works suddenly.
I remember watching one of your games actually midway through the season. It was Man United away, I think, which I think you won.
Yeah, that was a weird one. That was because that was Ruben Amorim's. He just took over Man U, and I think it was his third or fourth game. He'd not lost a game yet, and then I think we scored very early on. And I mean, they just played Arsenal and realised that they can't defend corners, and suddenly we scored with a corner after about 5 minutes, and they were like, "Oh, funny that." And it was a weird one. That was one of Andre Onana's worst games as a Man United goalkeeper this season. He gave us a couple of absolute gifts, but I think the way that it was 3-1, and then I think Bruno Fernandes scored a very good goal to make it 3-2, and then we were just defending for a good 25 minutes. But the way that we defended that is really important because seasons back, that's the kind of game we'd have lost like 5-3.
Yeah.
And suddenly we could defend. I mean, it wasn't clean, it wasn't pretty, but it was last ditch. It was committed. It was proper defending, which is something we haven't seen for years. It was messy, but it did the job. Yeah. And that was a good game. It was one of the very rare games that I actually felt we're okay here. Even at 3-2, I thought, I think we're okay. And as a Forest fan, I mean, I'm going back, like I said, 28 years. I've not felt like that for 28 years, where I've been able to have games against decent teams where I've been like, we might be okay. Even at 3-2, we might be all right. So, yeah, we've had a few games this season, I think, that have been all right like that.
I mean, there was a few points there that I'd really like to sort of like press home. So I remember the second season that you got into, that you were riding through the Premier League and you got the FFP kind of embargo. Can you sort of describe, I guess, what happened, with that, how you felt about it? Because I remember, for viewers at home, me and Alex, I know Alex quite well. We used to work together. I remember the conversations we had about squeaky bum time during that season because of the points deduction. So can you just sort of describe what happened with that?
I think I had so much frustration during that period, and you're probably fully aware of the frustration I had. I think the rules are in place for a reason. I don't disagree with the rules, but I think there was a certain amount of prejudice that we felt as a community, and Everton fans will understand this because they were just as victimised as we were, and they've got every right to be upset. It was the way that it was brought in, and they were trying to make an example. That's what upset the fan groups. They were trying to make an example of us, trying to make an example of Everton. We did break the rules. I'm not going to say we didn't. We did. We held out for the sale of Brennan Johnson. We were definitely, we were over the threshold. Brentford came in that summer with an offer for Brennan Johnson, and we said no, because we said we're going to get more money for him. We will not. And then Spurs came in and paid 20 mil more 2 months later. We were like, yeah, perfect. But we didn't meet the threshold. So we did break the rules, but it was the way that they were making an example of us. And it was the same with Everton. It was like, why are we being docked points? Everton had it worse than we did. We scraped through. We were very lucky the way that we, I think it was 4 points we got deducted in the end, and a bit of a threat and a massive fine. And to be honest, at the time, I remember when they announced it was going to be 4 points, and I remember thinking, actually, that might be all right, because I think we were fearing the worst. Obviously, Luton, plucky Luton, were like kicking up results out of nowhere, and they were like, well, we're going to catch him. We're going to catch him. And I was like...
Just to stop you, Alex, and I love this, and he'll love it as well. He won't love it. But Jez's second team is Luton. And I remember, he's gone off screen. Now, I remember that point in the season where I said to you in text, I was like, it's between you and Luton, right? Surely. So
I think for a while it was. I remember the after we got deducted the 4 points, I think we played Luton almost straight away. I remember this because I was down in London and I went to a Wimbledon game on the same day, and we were 1-0 up against Luton. Chris Wood scored early on in the first half, and we held it, and we squandered about 6 chances to make it comfortable, and then they came out of nowhere and scored in the 89th minute, and I've never seen so much anger from the Forest base as I did that day. They were like, that's twice this season, because they came to the City Ground and we were 2-0 up against them and making them look silly, and suddenly they got 2 goals and it was 2-2 out of nowhere. And it was like, we can't beat this Luton team. Who are this Luton team? Why can't we beat them? And they were exactly like that. And they were the one team that scared me. Obviously, that year we had Burnley, who were just, it was never happening for Burnley. It was never going to happen. But Luton actually looked half decent.
Yeah.
And I was genuinely scared because they seemed to be able to pull these results out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're the only team that are going to actually make us look silly. And we managed to get enough results at the end to get it over the line. But
I think sorry to interrupt, Alex. I think what it was with Luton was for 2/3 of the season, you're right, they were getting these plucky little results, little draws, wins at Kenilworth Road, where they were very difficult to play against. But they were also very unlucky with results like Arsenal, where they were 3-2 up with with 5 minutes to go. Liverpool at home, where they were 1-0 up and they drew 1-1. The game that did it for them was Sheffield United. So they had Sheffield United at Kenilworth Road and lost 3-1. After that, they didn't. I don't think they picked up another win, or maybe only 1 or 2 wins. That's what did them.
It kind of reminded me of Blackpool. It kind of reminded me of Blackpool in 2010, 2011, when they had so many. I remember when they beat Everton 5-3 that year, and it was like Charlie Adam was tearing up stuff. It was like they could actually do this. And if they beat Man U on the last day of the season, they'd have actually stayed up. And then they were 2-1 up at one point. I remember Gary Taylor-Fletcher scored. He was about 38 at the time, and it was like... And then out of nowhere, and then Man U obviously turned it on a bit. Michael Owen was in his absolute last year of his football career. But it was like that. Everybody kind of believed in them for a minute. It was like they could actually, because everybody was pitching them to finish 20th. Everybody was like, they're going to just be the laughing stock. And they weren't. They actually, they were not an easy team to beat, especially at Kenilworth Road. Like you said, Jez, at Kenilworth Road, there was a fortress. You couldn't go there and just win. Man City had half a job. Man City, I remember they destroyed them at Kenilworth Road. But I remember Luton had the lead for a while. It was like, could they actually do something stupid? And they had so many of those results where it was like, could they do something nobody expect? Yeah. And they were, to be honest, if it was anybody else apart from us down there, I'd have been rooting for them to stay up. Genuinely. if it had been Everton, if it had been anybody else, Palace, Villa, I would have been like, I really want them to do this. But because it was us and them, it was like,
no, exactly. It is what it is, isn't it?
It's sad what's happened to them now, unfortunately, the way that they've now had back-to-back relegations. It's horrific. It's unfortunate, and I feel for the fans.
No, I think they've got every chance to bounce back, though, hopefully. And I mean, I think we in terms of sort of bringing it back to Forest, I mean, at the start of that season, or should I say last season, did you ever think that they were going to do what they did? Be in the Champions League place the majority of the year and nearly make the Champions League, but actually get a Europa League spot?
I would have been happy with finishing 14th. Genuinely. It was one of those seasons. Like I said, with Nuno, we didn't know what was coming. He'd got a track record with Wolves, but Wolves kind of handed him a team on a plate. He tore up the Championship with them. He had a very good level of support. With Spurs are Spurs. He did his best in there. So we didn't know what to expect. I was very underwhelmed. When they brought him in, I was like, we've sacked Cooper for this guy.
Yeah. I want to talk about the Cooper. I want to talk about Cooper in a bit, but let go on about.
You've got to imagine, like Cooper. I will come to this obviously in a bit, but he was that much of a legend. The fact that Marinakis, our Greek owner, decided to sack him, and you're thinking you've got to bring somebody in. You've got to bring somebody half decent, and he brought Nuno in, and we were all like, not that he's a bad manager, but this is what you've sacked Steve Cooper for. This guy, and then results were very iffy towards the end of that season. He did enough to keep us up, and he had a lot of off-field issues that were against him, but he did enough. And there was a lot of talk last summer about him. Will he stay? Will he go? Is the point to keep him and build a team around him, or was he just somebody to come in and keep us up, and then we were going to look somewhere else? And they were like, no, he's part of the long-term project. And I was like, okay, fine. Recruitment was quiet last summer. It wasn't massive because we had 2 summers where we were laughed at for the recruitment because we spent stupid money, and we were rightly laughed at because we were doing silly stuff. But last season's recruitment was quiet, and it was like, okay, this could be a good sign, it could be a bad sign, but there wasn't a lot happening. And then first couple of games at home, we were pretty awful. I remember the first game of the season, I think it was Bournemouth at home. We conceded an 89th minute equaliser after dominating the game, and everybody was like, "Oh, here we go again. Here we go again. Same old nonsense with Forest." We do well, we play well, but we concede terrible goals. And I think the first 2 or 3 home games, we did the same thing. We took the lead, we looked really great, we conceded an equaliser, and then we didn't do anything. It was like, it's another season of mediocrity. But I think a lot of Forest fans have lost perspective because we got a little bit of this magic in our brains, because suddenly we were doing things that we hadn't done for years. We're winning away games that we don't, I think winning away at Liverpool was the start when we went to Liverpool in September, and people forget Liverpool should have scored 4 goals that day. They didn't. And we scored our one chance. It was a brilliant goal. And then we held them out. And then everybody was like, hang on a minute, this team could be something. And I was like, no, we just calm down. We've done this before. But we just started getting results together. And every week it was like, okay. And I was one of those fans that was like, I was still counting the points between us and relegation.
Yeah.
I'm that kind of guy.
I remember
I'm that kind of guy.
I remember we talked about this midway through the season, and I said, Alex, where do you think, you're riding high, and you're like, we're this many points away from relegation. So once we're safe, I'm happy.
You could call me a realist or a cynical person, but the game where we beat Manchester City at home, we won 1-0. I think it was about February time. That was the point where mathematically we were safe. And at that point, I was like, genuinely, we could lose every game now, and we're all right. And obviously, it'd been horrible, but I'd have been like, do you know what? This is the most unbelievable season. And fans have lost perspective of that. We had a tough run in towards the end of the season. We played some difficult teams. We lost some games that we shouldn't have lost.
Stop you there. You do realise you've just painted a target on your back.
I know.
When this goes out into the world,
I know.
We won't say where you live exactly. Don't worry.
Postcode right there. No, I get it. I think that it's just, I know a lot of Forest fans who've been like, after we've had some time to reflect, the last day of the season was what, a month ago?
Yeah.
After having some time to let the dust settle, it's been like, this is a brilliant season. But we did have a tough run in at the end. And if we won on the last day against Chelsea, I think we'd have got Europa League. We might have been tailgating a Champions League spot because of the Villa United result. But this is phenomenal. And I genuinely never thought I'd see this in my life. And that's not, I don't think that's unrealistic to say. I think I dealt with so many seasons with us being mediocre in the Championship, a few years in League One. And I know, you guys, you've been through this, I remember when Norwich had the years in League One, had the years in the Championship, had a few yo-yo seasons. You know what it's like to not really believe that something as crazy as finishing 7th in the Premier League is doable in this day and age. To do this is unbelievable. It's never been a better time to be a Forest fan in the last 30, 40 years. So I'm thrilled. And I don't know what's going to happen next season. Nobody does.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's a perfect segue, I think, because to me, what a lot of clubs struggle with, I mean, I was talking to a West Ham fan the other day, is when you get into Europe, and then you've got to balance that out with the Premier League campaign. And all of a sudden, you're finishing just above the relegation zone because you're fighting on all fronts. So what my question to you now is, what does next season look like on that with Europe and the Premier League? Because it's an unforgiving, obviously everyone knows it's an unforgiving league.
It's a horrible league. I mean, you talked about West Ham. I think Leicester is a very similar example, maybe to a slightly larger scale, when Leicester won the league back in 2017. And then they competed in the Champions League and they were half decent in the European Cup. But then league-wise, they just fell apart. And then they were relegated within 2-3 years after that.
Yeah.
I think we need to just be careful about taking too much stock. And I've seen a lot of comments that have been like, look at the Conference League teams. Look at what Chelsea did in the Conference League last season. We're going to walk this, we're going to beat these. And I think we need to take a moment and just think it's about stability. And I'm not too worried because of the way that the owner runs it. Marinakis knows this stuff. He's not an idiot. He's a bit boisterous. He's got a bit of a silly head on his shoulders sometimes. He's very passionate, but he's not an idiot. And I do think he's not going to let us get lost in that. The fans are, because you do. You're in a European competition. I'll be the same. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend I won't. I'll be, when we're playing these European games, if we win the qualifier if we're in the group stage of the Conference League, I'll be all over that. I'll be loving it. But we can't lose sight of what this means. If we get as far as, quarters or semis of the Conference League, but we finish 17th in the Prem. That's not progress. A European competition is what it is. You want to do well. You want to look good on the European stage. But I'd rather get beat in the Conference League. I'd rather look silly. I'd rather be made to look silly by a Cyprus third division team, to over exaggerate, but then finish 8th in the Premier League again.
Yeah,
no brainer.
I think
Stability is the one.
You got to look at it like that, haven't you? Sorry,
too many teams have done it. No, mate, too many teams have done it. This is the thing. They've had that season. You go back as far as 20 years. You look at some of the teams that went up and then they finished like 5th, 6th, 7th out of nowhere. And then give it 3 years, they're back in the Championship. And then Championship's unforgiving. You know that. Championship's horrible.
I think that's something that our previous sporting director spoke at length about. He sort of said, well, look, we can go for broke and stay up this season, or we can try and build something, i.e. let's build the infrastructure of the club. And essentially that's what they've done. But sort of going back to your sort of point earlier on about those sort of European games then. So you're going to have to probably invest in your squad. Has there been any sort of rumours about any transfers coming in?
Yeah, there's been a fair bit of recruitment talk. I think there's quite a lot of Brazilian links. We're bringing a few players from Botafogo who've been at the Club World Cup, and there's been a lot of spotlight on them because they beat PSG. And it was a bit of a fluke game, but they beat PSG, so you take the plaudits for that. Yeah. But there's a decent striker. I think his name's I can't remember what his name is now. But there's a good defender called Jez Cunha we're bringing in from them. Igor Jesus is the striker we're bringing in from Botafogo. I think they've agreed the money. It's just about personal terms. It's a quietly confident summer. We're not doing silly stuff because I think there's been a few transfer windows now. I think look back at last January for this. We've been linked with these players like Johan Wisser's a really good example from Brentford, a fantastic striker. Yeah. But Brentford are holding out for stupid money and we wouldn't pay it. And it's like, why wouldn't you pay it? You're champions, you aim for the Champions League. Why wouldn't you pay it? Yeah. No, you don't pay that stupid money. You don't, because it's not about that. It's about getting the right players in. And we've brought in players who are untested in the Premier League before, but they've done a great job. This season, the amount of players, Murillo and Milenkovic at the centre-half, a centre-half pairing like that, it's more than anybody would ever have expected in terms of what they've achieved. Most goal line clearances, most tackles. They've got so many accolades between them. They're unbelievable. And Murillo had half a season in the Prem last year. Milenkovic, it's his first season. He's captain of the Serbian team. But the Premier League, we know it's different gravy. Playing in the Premier League is different.
No, definitely.
I trust the recruitment.
What about my doppelganger?
Ryan Yates. Oh dear me. Honestly, if you look at Ryan Yates
for the because I don't really
pointed this out years ago. This was definitely.
I mean, my hair's a bit all over. I look like a nutty professor.
If you got less hair.
Apparently, Forest fans, Alex Porter thinks I look like Ryan Yates.
If you get a screenshot of Ryan Yates at this point, put it next to his face. I'm telling you right now, years ago, Ryan Yates, it's definitely him. It's just the cheek structure's there. That's him. That's literally him. That's literally him.
I've got a better one. I've got a better one, Alex. I've got a better one.
It's just so accurate.
This is me scrolling this all evening now.
No, I've got a better lookalike.
Oh.
I feel like this is a long-running joke because that absolute reaction was like,
for Forest fans that are also fans of Red Dwarf, Jez seems to think I look like Chris Barry, aka Arnold Rimmer, which thanks, Jez, really sets my world on fire, as you can imagine. Sorry, Alex, I really took on a tangent.
If Ryan Yates ever watches this, he's going to be really upset that he's been superseded by a Red Dwarf character. That's
I'm sure he doesn't even know what Red Dwarf is.
He might do. He might have parents that watch it. I don't know.
Oh God, that makes me feel old.
Sorry. No, to be fair, my sister loves Red Dwarf. I've never been interested in that.
So, I mean, the question next I was going to ask Alex is, I think we, as if we're in the Premier League, for teams like Nottingham Forest can't keep relying on the likes of the Championship teams coming up and failing straight away. And I think the last 2 seasons that's happened. We've the 3 that got promoted have gone straight back down. Eventually, someone's going to break that, and I think Leeds United could be one.
I think this season's going to break it massively. I think I can't imagine Leeds being relegation fodder in the same way that last season's teams were. Southampton were. It sounds harsh to say, but Southampton were relegated within a month. You could just see, because the way that Russell Martin set up with them wasn't bad, but then he was just so rigid. He was like, I'm not changing anything. I'm going to play this way and we're going to adapt. But Premier League teams are going to respect the way we play. Yeah. And then it didn't work out. It wasn't going to work.
Like
and then
it was too late. It was like watching Norwich.
It was very much, it was like, we're going to do this. We're going to play this way.
Yeah.
It's like, fine. Identity is great, but you've got to learn that Premier League teams are going to tear you apart if you just are that rigid. And it happened with Southampton. And I think the season before, in the same way, we were quite lucky in the way that we had Luton and Burnley, and I can't remember the third team for the life of me who went down that year.
Southampton. Oh, no, of course it wasn't.
Sheffield United.
Of course Sheffield United. Yeah.
Then 3 teams. And again, we talked a bit about the situation with the way we got our points deducted. If we hadn't come up against 3 teams that were as bad as Luton, Burnley, Sheffield United, we'd have been looking at a championship season. And everything would have been very different. And I think this season would have been the same. We did the double over Southampton, but it was never easy. Leicester have had too many problems off field and on field, and I can't see, because I think there's been too much of a yo-yo in the Championship Premier League the last few years. It's been too much. The 3 teams that go down are the favourites to go up. It's not going to happen this year in the Championship. So. Those 3 teams are not going to go back up. Not all 3 of them. And the 3 teams that have come up this year with Leeds are going to do something. Sunderland have got a point to prove because they've been away for so long. They've been laughed at, unfortunately, for the way that they suffered in their double relegation, and they've took a long time to build themselves back up. They're going to want to prove something. So Leeds and Sunderland, I don't think they go down so easily. Leeds will stay up. Sunderland might go down, but they're going to put a fight up. And then you've got the teams, unfortunately now, the Premier League teams that are down and about there, they're too good to go down. And that is one of those cliche statements, but it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard.
But that's why
you can't rely on that.
But that's why we were saying you're fighting on 2 fronts. So, how is that going to affect your season?
I think it only affects our season if we believe that we're relegation candidates. I think we've got to not let it get into our heads. I think that we've got to let the relegation battle be fought by the relegation contenders. And that's not easy. I think if you lose the first few... the fixture list has been quite kind to us in the same way it was last season. We've got to play Arsenal away in the first 6 or 7, which is the hard game. But I think in the first 6, we've got to play Burnley, we've got to play Sunderland. And in the first 2 games, it's Brentford and Palace. You expect, and this is not just because of the results of last season, but you expect results from those games. And we all know that a good start to the season makes the big difference. If you can win 2 out of the first 3 or 4, I know it sounds silly, but out of 38 games, automatically you've got that high that you're riding on. If we can win the first 2 games.
10 years, have we, Jez?
No. Definitely not. I think we always seem to go on a bit of a bad run, don't we?
We had Chris Houghton. What I want to talk to you about, Alex, whilst we've got you, is Steve Cooper, because it would be completely remiss of us not to talk about the man who got you into the Premier League from, I think, we've talked about this in a private outside of this podcast, but we've talked about the Chris Houghton to Steve Cooper transitional seasons. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think Chris Houghton is an old Norwich old boy. Steve Cooper kind of came out of nowhere, obviously at Swansea prior. Tell us a bit more about that, because I think it's a really interesting tale.
It is. I think Steve Cooper, he's not a bad manager. He came into Forest at a bad time. In the case, we were trying to break a bit of a cycle where we'd go through a season, we'd just about survive. We'd sack a manager 3/4 of the way through. We'd bring somebody in who stabilised and just about saved us from relegation, and then it would go again. Houghton came in and he was given the directive of just keep us going, keep us relatively safe while we rebuild behind the scenes. Marinakis, as owner, just took over a couple of years ago. He brought in a couple of managers that didn't work, and Houghton had that direction of just keep the team going. Don't make us look silly. If we're mid-table, we're mid-table. It's all right. But then he came in, and I think end of the season he did all right. And it was the 2021 season. He came in and he was all right. And then start of the season, I think it was early 2021. Obviously September 2021, but we just seemed to not have anything about us. He tried to impart his identity, and it was all about defensive play, and it was all about just defend, you'll be fine. Defend, you'll be fine. It had worked for him at Brighton. It had worked for him at Norwich to an extent. You know, he knew what he was doing at that point. It wasn't pretty. It yielded the results. It wasn't pretty. It was horrible football to watch.
I think it's sorry to interject on your point, but initially it did. But I think it just, and it goes back to the point I made earlier on about its sustainability, and we got found out. And I think he went on a run of the first season was with us. We didn't lose for like 8 or 9 games. That kept us up. And then the second season, we had 4 of the top 5 in the last 4 games or whatever it was. And they just sacked him because they knew we weren't going to do it. And I remember going to West Ham and just knowing we weren't going to get her. This is at Upton Park, so you can tell how long ago it was. We weren't. I just knew we weren't going to get a result, and it was getting to that point with. I liked Hewitt. He was my choice. So when he got appointed, I was quite pleased, and I think, as I say, initially, what you've said is exactly the same as what it was with Norwich. We'd lost our identity.
Yeah. He had a style, and he was like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to impart this style on you, and we're going to do all right.
Yeah.
It didn't work at Forest, and I think part of it was down to the fan base. You know, fans of Forest are, again, don't give my address away. There's a certain amount of entitlement. There's a certain amount of, we are Nottingham Forest. We should be playing exciting football. We should be getting results. Even in the pits of the Championship where we had awful seasons, the fans were still the same. The expectation was massive. Houghton came in with his way, and it was like, this ain't going to play. This ain't gonna work. Yeah. And he had a few games, and we ground out some decent results under him, but it was never going to go anywhere. But with Cooper, it was like it seemed to be instant. It was one of those things where you were waiting for the honeymoon period to end, and it never did.
Yeah,
it was insane. You know, we started to win. I remember when he came in, I was really happy about it because I remember him being, him at Swansea was unbelievable. I remember that the season he got Swansea into the playoffs was because we messed up. I was speaking to Morgan about this at the weekend, the way that Swansea stuck into the playoffs ahead of us at the last minute the season before. And then he left Swansea because they were making decisions transfer-wise against his better judgment. So he walked away. And suddenly we were talking to him, and I was like, bring him in. He knows what he's doing. He worked with enough of our players at the under-21 level. You know, he won the World Cup for England. I think it was under-21 or under-19s. But he'd worked with a lot of our players there at that level. Bring him in. Give him a chance. And suddenly we were winning away games. That was a big thing because we were notorious for losing away games. We couldn't win away from the City Ground for ages. But we were beating teams like... I know when you say, like, we go to Barnsley and win, it seems like, oh, well, of course you do. But it wasn't. Barnsley, go to teams like Barnsley. We went to Middlesbrough and won. We went to Fulham and won that season out of nowhere. It was like, what are you doing? He just knew what he was doing. He seemed to have this. And the more he won, the more the fans were behind him. Yeah. And he just seemed to ride a wave that never gave up. And I never believed we'd go up that season. Not out of being unfair to us, because we probably deserved it, but I think that it felt too soon. It was like he'd just come in about 8 games into that season. He came in and suddenly he was like, he was tearing things up. And the man will always be a legend. Whatever happens, there was always going to, he was untested in the Prem. He was he got a lot of work to do. The first season we stuck with him. He could have taken us down. It could have gone that far, but he got the results out of the games that we really needed to win. Arsenal at home, the last game of the season, winning that was monumental. It was huge. It was fantastic. He's always going to be a legend. No one's ever going to do what he's done. And we may go on to be a consistent Premier League team from now. We may go on to be a consistent European team. I don't know. But Steve Cooper will always be a legend.
Lay the foundations. Yeah, I think, look, it segues quite nicely into perhaps another legend that I'd like to acknowledge, Brian Clough.
Yeah, we have to
straight in the Brian Clough.
Yeah.
So, talk to us about the legacy that, and everyone knows it because everyone knows Brian Clough. And you've got.
I think it's important, Jez, to understand that Alex is only 28.
Yeah, but
me and Jez are both we're 40.
Yeah,
and both me and Jez obviously know about your history at the club.
No, it's it, and I think it'd
It's
be interesting
bled
to
in.
hear us.
It is bled in though,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
it's important to remember this because I think for my generation that's grown up knowing a Forest who've been in constant difficulty. I mean, my dad, for example, being a fan through the late 70s and 80s when we were European giants, when we were winning trophies, we were competing.
Like Ipswich.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to make the comparison. Now, Morgan knows this. I strive to not like live off that. It is a fantastic achievement of the past, and it's great to talk about, but it's not in any way relevant to how we've been recently. Brian Clough was unbelievable, but Brian Clough was unbelievable before Forest. People don't think about it. They talk about his Forest days because we won the European Cup 2 years in a row, and it was unbelievable. We took Liverpool out in the first round in '79. We went to Copenhagen and won 1-0 after a 3-3 draw at home. I hope nobody's stupid enough to write us off. That interview will always be, it'll be living in the memories of football for years. It can't be undervalued what he did. And like I said, my dad, that kind of generation, they grew up with this stuff where we were a big team. He's always going to be that legend. I think he died in 2004, God rest his soul. I've read his autobiography. Some of the stuff he did before Forest, he could have been something at Derby. If the owner of Derby had been a little bit more streetwise, because Brian Clough, I mean, people forget about Peter Taylor and how important he was to Brian Clough.
Yeah.
He was the second in command. He was fantastic. The pair of them were a team. If the Derby ownership hadn't, thrown out Peter Taylor and said, "What are you doing for this club?" Brian Clough would have took Derby to Europe. It would have made them the best team in England.
Have you watched The Damned United, Alex?
I've not. A big fan of Martin Sheen. I've not watched The Damned United, but I've read a few books around what actually happened around that. But it's understandable.
And I think the reason, sorry to interrupt you, I think the reason I'd recommend it is because it describes exactly what you just said about the everything that happened with Derby County prior to him going to Nottingham Forest. And I'd love you to just watch it and then let me and Morgan know at some point
have to watch it.
What you thought of the film, but also what you thought about Forest's lack of what's the word I'm looking for? Representation on that film. You get about 20 seconds at the end. It's hilarious.
I think that's the point, though. I think that's what it's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be about, because Brian Clough is talked about as such a legend. He's remembered as being the absolute mogul of football management. I think it's important to remember that the guy was a bit of a loose cannon, and he dealt with a lot of circumstances that that weren't his fault at teams like Derby, teams like Leeds. I mean, as a player, his career was cut short at Middlesbrough. He would have been a prolific striker. And he built himself off that. He built himself. But he was a bit of he was a bit too straight talking for a lot of people. The amount of Forest players he upset. He just walked in. And you wouldn't get away with it these days. The kind of stuff he got away with back in the 80s, there's no chance in hell you get away with that stuff these days. But he knew how to get results out of players. He knew how to get players playing well. Yeah. And ownerships, Leeds just didn't like it. Derby didn't like it. He's too much of a character. He's too much of a troublemaker. But my God, the man knew what he was doing. He knew how to get results. And we're living proof of that. He stuck around till I think it was 91 when he retired and we got relegated. Home game against Sheffield United. We lost 2-0.
You like Sheffield United, don't you, Alex?
I don't dislike Sheffield United. I think that there are better yo-yo teams that are Sheffield United in the Premier League and Championship. I think.
But what I want to sort of talk to you about before we sort of come to the end, because we're sort of edging for time now. But what I want to ask you is, what was your first game? What was your a couple of questions? So, what was your first ever match day experience as a fan? And to ask you a question, when was the first ever time Forest made you cry? So 2 questions.
There's a memory. Yeah, I think my first ever match day experience was really ordinary. it was about, I think it was 2003-04 season. It was at home to Preston North End. My dad and his best mate took me. It was a Tuesday night game. It was one of the most championship games you're ever going to see. It was awful. We lost 1-0. We conceded in the 10th minute. Like the first 10 minutes, we were 1-0 down, and we didn't do anything the whole game. It was that memorable. It was absolutely terrible. I've had so many better memories since then. My best memory after that, I think the first game I went to after that, we beat Chesterfield 4-0 at home, and I won tickets for that off a competition. It was unbelievable. And it was like, oh, fell in love with it suddenly. But no, my first matchday experience, and I kind of enjoy the fact that my first matchday experience was so poor, because it's like, it reminds you why you love the teams you love, because it's not about these things that you can say, well, oh, it was like a Disney ending, it was like a fairy tale ending. It was real. It was raining that Tuesday night. We lost to Preston North End at home. It was awful, but you don't lose that magic. That was 20 years ago now, 21 years. Never forgot that night. And it was so ordinary, but it was brilliant.
That's what football is, though. It's the pie in the hand. And like it's freezing cold, and you're sat. I don't know.
When you're that age, it's watching your dad drinking a beer in the concourse, and it's watching the little match day things, watching all the stuff going on, all the fans around you talking about stuff you don't understand when you're like 10 years old, and you're just there you're there because you just know it's the right thing to do, to be there. You love it, but you don't know why you love it. You don't understand all the stuff that these people are talking about. You just know in your heart you're meant to be here. This is the place that's going to set your mood for the next rest of your life. It's the way it is. You can hate it every Saturday, but you love it as well.
Because do you remember, like, a question for both of you is, at this point in the calendar year, do you not, both of you, miss that horrible anxiety-riddle feeling that sits right?
We're having different reactions right now. We're quite listening. Very different reactions.
At 3 p.m. until 5, where after 5 o'clock, you're like, you can just be like.
I have to be fair and say, right, considering what happened to Forest last season, I have to be objective about this and say I did also miss that before last season when we were getting slammed by everybody, because there's just something about that. You could lose 3 consecutive games 4-0, and on that 4th Saturday you can be there like, we just might do something magical today, and you can't help but get wrapped in. And I did it for years, championship years, where we were never expected to beat anybody, and I'd sit there on Saturday mornings and I was like, I'm not going to follow the result. I'm not going to look. But in the back of my brain, what if we could just out of nowhere?
Yeah.
And it makes the weekend. And it's like this whole weekend, it's horrible how it makes the weekend. It's horrible how it makes or breaks it. But we just can't help it, can we?
It gets to a certain point, doesn't it? I think if you ride on a crest of a wave like Forest were last season, then brilliant. You're engaged till the end of the season. But I think for Norwich last season, and for a lot of our seasons actually, since I've supported the club, it gets to about March time, and you haven't really got anything to play for. And then when it gets to that, the April and the May games kind of like pale into insignificance, and it doesn't really matter. But in the seasons where we do have something to play for, i.e. when we got promoted under Fark the first time, that was like that. That was sort of like, oh, bloody hell. I think I've said to you before, Morgan, I actually put a bet on us losing, and this was when the first time we got promoted under Fark, and we played Stoke City, if you remember, and that was the result that kind of done it for us. To cover my sanity, I just bet that for Stoke to win. Just basically, so I had something either way. Does that make sense?
You're going to win.
If Norwich won, I was like, yes, we're in the Premier League. If Stoke won, I've got 40 quid. So
the other question, obviously, about the crying. Go on.
Not letting that go. No, I think we've all had playoff experiences, and I think that's the one. Us and Sheffield United are quite notorious for being the playoff bogey teams, in the way that we've just not been able to get through the line if we finish between 3rd and 6th in any division. Obviously, we went up through the playoffs to get to the Prem, but that was the first time we've ever won in the playoffs in any competition. But Yeah, it was Yeovil Town. Oh, it's horrible to admit that Yeovil Town were the team that made me cry like a little baby when I was 11 years old. But yeah, it was the playoff game, and we were really expected to just destroy Yeovil. It was us and Yeovil, and then Blackpool, and I can't remember who else it was. And we went to Yeovil, went to Hewish Park, and we made them look silly. And we won 2-0. We scored 2 penalties. There were soft penalties, but they were penalties. And then it was like, just get a draw, just chill out. And it was a horrible at the City Ground. It was a horrible. It was a Friday night, I think, and it was 1-0 to Yeovil quite early on. Aaron Davis, if any Yeovil aficionados will remember, Aaron Davis was their absolute talisman at the time. Scored and out of the blue, just hit one from the edge of the box, and we equalised in the second half. Scott Dobie, a very unmemorable striker, if he's listening, I apologise. Bless his soul. Scored one of his only goals of Forest ever, and then we were fine. It was 1-1 till the end, 3-1 on aggregate, and then we conceded 2 of the most stupid goals: an own goal and then a silly giveaway. And then Yeovil ended up going on to win 5-2 on aggregate. And I've never, my whole family came around to my house. I remember that. I watched it, and I obviously care a lot more than the rest of my family. They were just like, "Oh, this is fun. Let's just do it." I just went off to my room, and I just kind of was like, I don't want to be with people right now. I couldn't believe how much I was upset by it. And I remember my dad, who was the kind of guy who would never be outwardly emotional, even with football. He was very close. And then he just turned up at the door and was like, he just gave me a hug and was like, "This is what football is, mate. You're gonna do this for the rest of your life. Yeah. You know, this is your first experience, but my God, this is what it is. This is football." And he just sat there and he just held me, and I absolutely bawled and I couldn't even understand why I was crying. I was like, why on earth is this bothering me so much? And then just never looked back. It's just what you do. It was horrible. But then start of next season, I was there. First Saturday of the season, next season, we won at home 2-0. I can't remember who we played, but we won at home 2-0. I was there. I was like, ready for this stuff. Let's go again. We could have got heartbroken in the playoffs again. I'd have been there. It's just you can't not, can you? You can't not. No. You know, we could go to the lowest of the low.
I think I don't know about you, Jez, but since we've been doing this podcast, I think for me, it's been more about talking to fans and their experiences that has kind of touched me. Yeah. Whereas going to the games, obviously I get excited, but I don't know if it's kind of, I'm more interested in kind of understanding about people's emotions and why they're connected to their clubs now. Whereas I think last season was very transitional for us. Yeah. So transitional that I just didn't care is the wrong word. I just didn't have that same connection because all of our players were super young and super new, super fresh, super prone to making mistakes. And so it was just like, there's no identity here right now. And so I guess when you're watching your team play and you start to see Jez will always roll his eyes at me for saying this, but a groundswell with the players and the manager moving forward, then you have that connection. I think that's the kicker. Just very conscious, aware of time. Yeah. Couple of little tidbits for Forest fans. Alex Porter, do you know who Paul McGregor is?
I do remember Paul McGregor. That's going back to 02-03 kind of season. That is. That's going back a while.
I've got him down as playing quite a while ago. So Paul McGregor, I remember seeing him many years ago in Shoreditch playing in a punk rock band called Ulterior. And I was like, who is this guy? Turns out Paul McGregor was a former Nottingham Forest forward. Jez, do you remember him?
Yeah, I know the name. I think it was a little bit before that. I think it was late 90s possibly, but I might be wrong. I'm not, my knowledge of football's all right, but it's not that good.
So shout out to Paul McGregor, if you're watching this. I enjoyed Ulterior. You were very good.
Yeah, well done.
And Serge Pizzorno from Kasabian played for your youth team, if that's correct.
I didn't realise that. I know he went on to play. I think did he go on to play for Leicester at a certain level?
Yeah.
It was a Leicester fan. I know that he was a big
Yeah.
Leicester fan because obviously Kasabian were sort of born and bred in Leicester, and he was a massive Leicester fan. But I didn't know he played for the youth team, so that's a little bit of knowledge there.
Yeah, I think he's often turned out for this soccer aid stuff, and looked half decent.
He plays, goal he scored against David Seaman, that one lob to make it 1-0. Everybody remembers that. It was unbelievably brilliant.
Well, look, Alex, thank you so much for coming on. Just before we let you go, we always do Morgan's random question of the week. So,
as if he's not after just random questions, he's gonna pick a random question of the week.
This is very random. So, I'm going to hand you over to Mr. Morgan Hewitt for the random question of the week.
So, sorry for you, Alex, and sorry to all the Forest fans and Norwich fans who watch this. It's my shtick, and I've got I'll go to my grave with it. Who'd have thought 6 months ago? Anyway, random question.
No, Morgan. Turn the chair around and do it properly. Otherwise, you're sacked.
You've got to do it properly. If you don't do it properly, there's no point.
Sacked. This guy. Okay. Right, 1, 2, 3. Random question of the week.
Brilliant.
So, Nottingham Forest, famous for a particular forest. Tell me what that forest is, Alex Porter.
That's Sherwood Forest.
Indeed it is. For those of you who know who Robin Hood is, the question is, Alex, out of Robin Hood and his band of merry men and the sheriff of Nottingham with his villainous retinue, what character most represents your characteristics and values?
Ooh, what in terms of the Robin Hood? Okay,
it can be the Kevin Costner Prince of Thieves version, if you so will.
I'm going to go for the BBC Jonas Armstrong version. I don't think his name was Jonas; it was something Armstrong. Anyway, Robin Hood character. I would probably say. I'd probably say Little John. I think people often underestimated Little John. I feel like he was often taken at face value for what he did. He was often the kind of person that would be looked at and be like, I know what he brings to the table. But I feel like there was a lot more than just his physical attributes. I feel like he offered a lot of stuff. He was very, very, very close to the people. People don't realize how much he actually cared about the people that he was protecting as part of the band. And I think his loyalty to Robin, if you go so far as to read into the stories, was quite hefty, more than what people realize. And I think he was the one person that Robin could always trust to do anything. And I think that's a big one. I think it's important to remember that loyalty, no matter what happens, loyalty is the key.
Whoa, that goes back to football. That's what you did there.
It's almost as if I brought that back on purpose. You know,
how did you do that on the fly? Because I didn't. This was the whole point of the random question of the week. God, you're good.
I'm okay with dealing with random questions. It's the structured questions I can't do.
Jez, I have to pass it over to you, my man.
Friar Tuck.
For what reason? Can you give any kind of justification for Friar Tuck as an answer?
He was a bit of a big lad, wasn't he? He was a big lad.
What does that even mean?
He was a big lad. That's what
he was a big lad. There. Yeah, so he liked the beer as well, from memory. I think it was when I think of Friar Tuck.
He was a big fan of the ale. He was a big fan of the ale.
He was a big fan of the. I always remember. Always think when I think of Friar Tuck, as he's just got this jug in his hand and he's just swigging down whatever he can find, and that's me when I come back to Norwich for the game.
Well, thankfully, Friar Tuck didn't have to watch Forest.
Within reason, within moderation.
Friar Tuck, I don't think drove a car from my best knowledge of Robin Hood.
Yeah, I think he had a horse, didn't he?
He drove the women crazy, just like Jez.
Yeah. So yeah, Friar Tuck.
That was Guy and Gisborne, actually.
Oh,
go on, back to you.
Hang on, this guy's ruining it for everyone. Who would I be?
Who would you be?
Who would you be?
I would be Guy of Gisborne.
I just gave you that answer right there.
I know exactly. You ruined it. So the debonair of the Sheriff of Nottingham, not a man to be crossed, but a loyal one nonetheless. Guy of Gisborne. Can we all say this? Ready, Jez? I'll throw it over to you. Ready? Guy of Gisborne. Guy of Gisborne. Go on.
Guy of Gibson.
Gibson. That was a guy who played for Man U. That was Ben Gibson.
Gisborne. Guy of Gisborne.
Oh, Gisborne.
Yeah.
Guy of Gisborne.
That'll do.
That'll do. Okay.
There you go.
Alex, thanks once again. It's been great to get to know you, but also about Nottingham Forest as well. And I hope you have a really good season again next season. And
so do I.
Good luck. Good luck in the conference. Is it the Conference League you're going into?
Conference League. Yeah. It's Europe. Good. Let all those Forest fans remember.
It'll do, and I think good luck, and I really hope you do well, and keep in touch as well. So we might see you in the cup. Who knows? If we're
who knows? We could be European champions in May. You never know. You never know. Positivity.
Morgan, thank you once again as always. And we've got some more of these.
That seems very tentative.
We've got some more of these coming up, haven't we? Is what I was going to say. So we got a Spurs fan coming up next, haven't we?
We do have a Spurs fan, yeah. But is it Alex? Is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to before?
Oh, sorry,
before Jez does his usual ending credit thing.
Well, anyone at all in the world?
Could be anyone at all in the world.
Oh, crikey. This sounds very cliche, and I'm sure a lot of Forest fans will stick with this. I'd like to just give a shout out to Stevie Cooper. I would like to give a shout out to the man who has done so much for this, not just on the field, but the amount of work he did in the community, the amount of people he touched in his absolute conquest to make himself a part of the community. Massive. That man will never hear this, I assume, but what an absolute... The things he's done for this club. And I hope he does one day hear this. The things he's done for this club. He's heard this a million times, but what a man.
Yeah.
Not just agreed. What a manager, what a man.
Yeah, I think Stuart Pearce is worth a shout out as well, because as a former electrician, he could come and put a light in your house so we could actually see you.
Here's a Stuart Pearce fact. The penalty that Stuart Pearce missed in was it 1990? Stuart Pearce
1990, Italia 90,
on my dad's birthday. My dad never forgave him for that. And then my dad met him a few years ago and told him, I never forgave you for missing that penalty on my birthday. And he thought that was Stuart Pearce thought that was fantastic. It was unbelievable.
That's good.
But what a guy.
He's still a great guy. I mean, I think he's a legend, and I think the story of him advertising his company in the program, and
I know,
Brian Clough coming with the iron and saying you got to fix. I can't remember Brian Clough's wife's name, but said he's got to fix the iron, otherwise he's not playing next week.
That was very Brian Clough.
Basically said to all the lads once about Stuart Pearce. So, lads, what did you think of our captain for England the other night? And they're all going, "Oh yeah, he was all right." And Brian Clough goes, "I thought he was shite." What a legend!
So him.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, thanks everyone else for watching. You can follow us on all of the social media channels. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X. You can now watch and listen to the show, well, at least watch the show on YouTube. You can listen to the show on all of our other podcast channels. I've been Jez Davies.
I've been somewhere between Insanity and Morgan.
And I've been a very lucky Forest fan for the last year or so. Long may it last.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Watching. Take care.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Barkley. Thanks so much for listening. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review if you enjoyed the show. You can also catch all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you've got any questions, stories, or topics you'd like us to cover, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, on the ball, City.